Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Pastor Mark Tipton, who was a pastor here in Burlington in the mid-90s, and he has served in many places throughout the United States and even in Africa. He shares about his experiences, about the work that God has done in and through him. So let's get into the conversation with Pastor Tipton today. Mark, thank you for being a guest on our podcast and taking time to share a little bit about your story and what God has done in and through your life. And so as we begin, can you share a little bit about life growing up? Where'd you live, siblings, church background, hobbies, those types of things?
Sure. We grew up in the Southeast, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Nashville. And I grew up going to a Nazarene church probably just on Sunday mornings. Mom and Dad got married in the Nazarene church just because the Wesleyan Methodist Church wouldn't marry them. Mom had been divorced. And so, but the Nazarene pastor did. And so we were grateful for that. And so we've been a part of the Nazarene church ever since. And living in Nashville, we went to what was called the Donaldson Church of the Nazarene there. And then Dad moved around in South Carolina and in Georgia. We ended up in Dalton, where I am now, and in Dad's house in 1969. And from there, that I joined the Church of the Nazarene for the first time here in Dalton, Georgia. Here, my mom and dad found Christ. My brother passed away, and where I at that time received the call to preach, and then later on in college, the call to be a missionary. I thought that I was called to be a missionary even as a child, but it didn't register. So we went to Kentucky Mountain Bible College, my wife and I, and we went to Trevecca. She became a medical assistant, and I earned my physician assistant degree there. And so we went to Africa, and the medical work didn't work out there. The government of the South African homeland took over the hospital and kicked all the missionaries out. So we were no longer able to serve as medical missionaries, but the church asked me to be in church growth, and I said, sure. And so we served the Lord there in South Africa and Swaziland in church growth. So from there, we came back to the States, and with our children, Aaron and Kristen, and they're both doing as well as adult children could do in this age. Kristen lives in Richmond, Kentucky, and is an accountant for a large construction company. And Aaron lives here in Dalton. And so we are blessed with them and our grandchildren. We have Cole and our bonus grandson, Johnny. And so that's a little bit about my life, where we grew up, some of the ministry we've been in. And of course, we loved our time there in Burlington. It was special, very special for us, and I hope for the people, but especially for us, it was good.
Now let me backtrack a little bit. You mentioned you got a physician's assistant degree. What drew you to that, and did you do any medical practice here in the States?
Well, of course, I was invited to work for a couple of doctors. They wanted me to come and be their PA, and I kept telling them I'm going to Africa to be a PA and going to Africa to be a PA. I just felt drawn to medicine, and felt that God was calling me to medicine. I thought he was calling me to permanently stay in Africa. God's callings, are without repentance, but yet there's one call, and I think there's many appointments, and I I don't know exactly why God allowed us to go through that process, but He did, and we've used our medical work for all the time that we've been in ministry, helping people. When you go to the hospital, I can look around, I know what's going on, and the doctor's out, I can explain to the family and encourage them, and bless them that way. One exciting thing happened to us when I was pastoring in Columbus, Georgia. We merged two churches together, and so I was a co-pastor, and my co-pastor and I were having a meeting, and it was a pretty intense meeting. We had some really important things to discuss, and so I thought he was joking when he said, "Oh, I'm dizzy," and he started moving around like this, and he fell toward the floor, and I grabbed him before he hit the floor. I was on the other side of the desk. I ran over and grabbed him, pulled him off the chair, and he was gone. I mean, he wasn't breathing, his heart wasn't beating, and so God, helped me to be able for 9+ minutes to do CPR, waiting on the ambulance to get there, and even with him being an Alabama fan, I breathed for him and I pumped his heart to keep the Alabama fan alive. And so God kept him alive. I mean, really, it was a miracle that he was living because of that long a time doing CPR, and they had to shock him and so on and so forth. But he recovered fully after bypass surgery, and so being a PA, just being attuned to medical things helped me to at least one life saved, and so I was grateful for that. And maybe that was the one reason why I became a PA. Who knows?
But as you said, it took you to Africa, as that's where you felt God was taking you. Can you share a few highlights or just fond memories from your time in Africa?
Sure. Yeah, we had a great time. We loved it. We love the Zulu people, Swazi people, all the people of Africa. We were there when apartheid had not yet died. And so Mandela was still in prison, and the ANC were still trying to get their rights to vote. They were using terrorist methods to get their right to vote. They were bombing and killing and their own people and also whites. So when we got there, many of the black South Africans of all races didn't like whites, no matter where they came from. And we were Americans, so we were at that time boycotting South Africa, and the white people didn't like Americans. So we weren't liked by the white people, and the black people didn't know why we were there. But what was really the cool thing is God used us as a neutral party to bless both the Zulu and the Afrikaans community. We made friends with both. While we were there, God used us to be able to build 3 churches and 4 parsonages using alabaster funds. And so alabaster is one of my favorite things to do. I'm filling up my box. It's about full. I'm going to have to get another box because I just keep, I believe in it. I've seen it. I know what it does. It makes a difference. So, I guess, seeing all the animals and making friends with the people. I'm going to the General Assembly this year, and I'm hoping that some of our friends from South Africa will be there. I haven't seen them in so long, and I would love to see them again. God helped us to learn Zulu while we were over there. I mean, that was just within a year I was speaking Zulu, and that was a miracle. And so a lot of wonderful things. Could tell you story after story after story after story, but it'd be too long.
How long were you there?
We were there about 4 years.
Okay.
Missionaries in Church of Nazarene, a little over 5 years, doing deputation work and mission work. And I felt God calling me back to America while we were in Swaziland. I was burdened about something, and he laid a burden on my heart. I couldn't get away from it, and ultimately he revealed it as my need to go back to America to be a missionary to my own people. And right now, I understand why. We need Jesus more now than we did when I came back. So,
yeah, and particularly our denomination, the Church of Nazarene, there are significantly more African Nazarenes than North American Nazarenes, or at least USA and Canada. So, not that numbers always tell the story of that, but yeah, our context needs Jesus. That's for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely, we do. Yeah, I mean, you think about it, with the Church of the Nazarene around the world growing as rapidly as it is, in third world countries and in countries that are going through persecution. We sit here in Western civilization and think we've got it rough when our political party doesn't win or something else happens, and they go through the loss of their goods, their homes, their lives, their family members, their churches, and but they've got it tough, and God is using them to spread the gospel in a way that's not happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you alluded a moment ago. I think you said in Dalton is where you received your call to ministry. Maybe I was wrong. Can you share about your experience of this call?
No. No, I've been impressed since I was a 5-year-old boy that I should be a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get that. I don't understand that. And then when I was saved and when I found sanctification and was filled with the Spirit, the thing that was there was when asked what am I going to do with my life, the only thing that God would put in my head was to preach. And so that's where I got the call. It was just there. It wasn't something that happened. And that's why, I can't stop. I mean, I worked in my dad's business here while I was here taking care of him, being a bill collector. He owned a collection agency, and my sister was running it. Dad was here at home, and I was taking care of him, but I was also working at the collection agency. And I did really well there. It's not a problem. But once I got an opportunity to retire, bye-bye collection agency. This is not for me. I'd rather deal with ordinary church people than people who owe money. But it's a call that I can't get away from.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do anything else but preach the gospel and share the good news of Jesus with church and the unchurched and the disenfranchised.
Now you went to Africa, then you came back to the States. Can you briefly tell us the different places you've served in ministry?
Right. We were in Lenore City for a brief time, at Lenore City first, and then we went to Oak Ridge Church of the Nazarene. And we were at Oak Ridge when we came to Burlington. And from Burlington, we left and went to a church. I'm not going to name the church in Ohio. It was a difficult place. The church had accepted a bunch of folks in who knew nothing about the Church of the Nazarene and holiness. And I'm a holiness preacher, and I preach holiness, I preach sanctification. And they started bailing like crazy. They thought, and bucking and kicking and screaming. And I had board members who were not Nazarenes and who did not believe in holiness. I mean, they still drank, they still smoked, they still cursed, they just were welcomed in and loved because we accept them and because they attend our church. Not me. I said I can't make a board member or bring someone in who's doing those things unless they understand who we are. Mm-hmm. and what we're about. But it was so tough. In 18 months, we left that church. We went to Springfield, Ohio, and then to Oregon, Ohio. And Oregon, Ohio is where I guess I did my biggest work in regards to buildings in America. We sold our property there in Oregon, Ohio. We bought 40 acres of land and built, went through a $3 million plus building project and built a 25,000 square foot church. And it was just amazing. It's a great worship facility and a great facility for youth and children. And we just very proud of that. The people had a vision. They wanted to do it. And I helped them. I helped them. I didn't do it. I helped them accomplish that goal. So then from there, I went to take care of my mom, helped take care of my mom when she had Alzheimer's. And then from there, Columbus, Georgia, and then Belton, Texas. And that's where we were when I came home to help take care of Dad.
Yeah. So you've had several stops along the way. And one of the questions I'd like to ask pastors is, what are some of the blessings that you've experienced? Maybe you can give specific examples, but also generalize as well. You've alluded to a few difficulties, but any difficulties that people might not think of could be appropriate as well.
Every day is a miracle. I find that every circumstance and every difficulty brings about the realization that God is almighty, He is all present, and He is all knowing. And if He takes me there, it's going to be okay. Difficulties have been the way that I've grown. Without them, I wouldn't have been a better pastor, a better preacher, a better person, a better dad, a better grandpa, a better friend. And I didn't become bitter. There was that temptation to become bitter with difficulties, but I became better. And it's because God's Spirit made me better. If I had let it, there's a lot of stuff that would have made me very bitter in churches. Difficulties at that one church. The difficulty at that one church was the differences. We like to think that diversity is wonderful, but diversity in doctrine in the same church is not wonderful. No, especially if you're unwilling to compromise your, signature doctrines for someone else's signature beliefs. And, we just are unwilling to do that. And we've always tried to stand for what the Church of the Nazarene believed, most of all, though, for the Word of God. There was similar difficulty. We were at a church, and the ladies were listening to a Beth Moore video. Okay, Beth Moore is not a Nazarene. Okay, Beth Moore is a, dyed-in-the-wool Southern Baptist woman. Okay, and so what I tried to do is I tried to say, okay, now, ladies, whenever Beth Moore is teaching Southern Baptist theology in her teachings, you need to just make sure that the ladies who are there understand that this is not what we believe. Man, I about got my head chopped off for that. And surely a woman would be easily sit down and say, this is just not what we believe. We need to understand that, take the good from what she's teaching and move on. Oh no. So that's one of the things, the difficulties that you go through, building a building. My goodness, it took, for building that building. We wanted to sell our building and start construction at least a year and a half before it happened. And we had to pray. Everybody had a vision to go out there and do something, and we weren't able to. We didn't have the funds. I mean, it was just not going to happen. And so we had to ask God, Lord, what's your vision if we can't sell this property? Well, He helped us to decide we would go out and build a smaller church out on the property and have 2 campuses. And so we prayed, and we felt, the vote of the congregation, get this, and about 250 people voting, and 250 people voted unanimously to do that, to leave the other vision and to go in the smaller vision, to get out there, get a footprint out there, and worship and minister in both places. We were already having 2 worship services anyway. So they voted to do that, and a week and a half after we voted to do that, the church sold.
Mm.
It took the step of faith. It took the obedience of the people, the unity in prayer and in faith, that God said, "Oh, you're serious about this, aren't you?" And yeah, we are. And the church sold, and it sold for what we were wanting it to sell for. And the people who got it were great people, and they came in and they turned it into a funeral home. They turned it into an American Baptist church, and beautiful people. And the lawyer who was there, who helped us, he didn't charge us anything. He was a member of the First American Church. He didn't charge us anything for the cost of the sale. You know, these are just small snippets of how God has used difficult situations and turned them into blessings. And it's a perspective, it's an attitude that God gives us, and I'm grateful for it.
That is, and that's one of the great things about the Church of the Nazarene is the optimism of holiness, that God can transform, he can change, he can do things now. And whether we're talking about something of the sale of a building to our spiritual lives and the work he can do in us, God is an active God who is doing things in us right now, and so we're grateful for that. But I always like to end with pastors with the question of, what is giving you hope about the church right now? Like what is just make you say, man, the church, if it can just continue to do this, it's going to be, the Spirit's going to be poured out in a powerful way.
You know, I'm pastoring a very small church right now in Rossville, Georgia. It's a part-time church. They're about 25 miles away, and we have an average of about 17 people. And when I went there, we had 4 people in our congregation who were over 90. One hit 100 this past year, and then she passed away. The other lady was in her 90s, and she passed away. I have 2 board members, 93 and 96. They've been married almost 70 years. Oh, they have been married 70 plus years. And Paul has myasthenia gravis and asthma, and his ankle bones have collapsed and are deteriorated, and she is sick with only 25% of her kidneys functioning. And I want to tell you, they are at church every Sunday, no doubt, COVID or what. And I look at that, and I've got a couple of other smaller groups that are families who can't come regularly. But Paul and Arvina, they are picked up by someone who is in his 80s, brings them to church. They totter into church, sit down. They're the most encouraging, the most giving, the most loving people you could ever meet. And they shouldn't even be coming to church, but they come anyway. That gives me hope that if the Spirit of God can do that for Paul and Arvina and make them faithful, loving prayer warriors for Christ. She just gave up being the missionary president when she was 92. Think about it. He was the treasurer 3 years ago when he was 93. That gives me hope. That tells me that the Holy Spirit can do anything if people are willing. And so I believe that God will take the willingness of the people and transform it into the faithfulness of people like Paul and Arvina. I believe he can do it. That just truly gives me optimism for the future. I know we've got great children's ministries, youth, young adults, but if they will give their lives completely to God, like this couple did, we're unstoppable.
Yeah, that's powerful, and that's a great reminder. The fact of, it's their life of faithfulness. They just didn't arrive there. It was little steps of faithfulness throughout their lives.
Absolutely.
That got them to that, and so it's something anybody can do. Just commit to Jesus. It takes your life, but anybody can do it. And so that's a great word, a great sense of encouragement for us as the church. We can look to those who've gone before for inspiration, and to follow in their footsteps to continue the work that Jesus wants to do in and through us. So awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for being guests on our podcast. We appreciate you investing in us again, and just your time in Burlington was valuable and continues to have a lasting impact. So thank you for being a guest on the show. We appreciate it.
Sure. If I may end in this one thing, I always keep up with your corn, because that was one of the things that God blessed us with when we got there. That little bit of extra acreage, and Dan Miller, his tractor and his ability to come out there and plant that corn, and God grows things, doesn't he? And he's grown Burlington. He's grown the people there. He's given them a good pastor, and good things are happening. And I'm just grateful to have been a very small, really small part in that. And I always look to that. It's just amazing. And I also remember going out and picking some wonderful ears of corn right outside of the parsonage. And it was wonderful. So this has been good. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. We appreciate it. So thanks, Mark.
Sure thing. All right.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.